Okay, so let's talk about an alternative view. I think I've done a really good job, at least trying to do a good job of getting you to be a bit skeptical about some of this way of thinking about hypersexuality and pathologizing sexuality and what some of the problems we run into are when we try to do that. So what's another way of thinking about whether sex is being engaged in for healthy reasons or unhealthy reasons, and whether or not somebody might require the assistance of a clinician as a result of that? So let's talk about this. Here's an alternative view to the hypersexuality diagnostic approach: the sexual health model. The sexual health model is really one that focuses on the idea that it's a human right to pursue meaningful sexuality, that sexuality is a part of our biology, it's a part of our evolution, and it's also a part of our well-being. And instead of talking about sexual behavior as normal or abnormal, depending on how often people have it and frequency and that kind of thing, let's instead think about whether or not people are engaging in sexual behavior in ways that satisfy as opposed to obstruct their goals or ideals. And so in this model, sexual health is defined as, quote, this is on the slide, the integration of the somatic, which is body, physical, emotional, intellectual, and social aspects of sexual well-being in ways that are positively enriching and that enhance personality, communication, and love. And this is based on the World Health Organization definition. So you can see from this definition, it's really not about, well, you do it more, you do it less, you're normal, you're not. It's not even about how many partners somebody has. It's nothing like that. It's more about if your engagement in sexuality essentially serves your well-being, serves your goals, doesn't create emotional distress, doesn't obstruct your social functioning or your social health or your social engagement, is physically pleasurable and not physically harmful, is stimulating to you intellectually, then we don't pathologize it if you're having sex with more than one partner or you're having sex every day. That really doesn't determine whether or not your sexual behavior is in line with or obstructing your somatic, emotional, intellectual, and social well-being, right? This allows for a lot of individual differences in sexuality and doesn't pathologize who somebody has sex with or how many people they have sex with or how frequently or infrequently they have sex. It's really not about that. It's about whether your sexuality is serving your well-being. And if it is, then it's not, quote, abnormal. If it's obstructing your well-being, if it's obstructing your goals, then maybe speaking with the clinician about how to rectify that can be helpful to you. But you can see where this is a much more inclusive model without pathologizing sexuality as it differs across people. So to summarize the criteria on slide 16, despite several proposals, there is no unanimous agreement in the clinical field or in the health psychology field for that matter, or in the clinical psychology field about how to define sexual addiction. In fact, there's not even unanimous agreement that such a thing makes sense to try to define. The proposed category of hypersexual disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual was rejected for inclusion in the most recent 5th revision. So this unfortunately leaves clinicians to apply their own definitions in their practice, and it varies all over the place. And is problematic because the manual that specifies agreed upon diagnostic criteria has rejected this disorder completely, yet people are still profiting from it, still treating it in private clinics and charging lots of money. So we have to ask about the ethics of that. There is still lingering concern amongst many professionals that even if such a category were to be included in a future DSM, It might pathologize individual differences in sexual behaviors that happen to be outside the average or the norm. And that's a concern. Just like there was a time when homosexuality was considered a disorder just because it was outside the norm. And now that is no longer the case. And attraction to people of the same sex is considered just another normal human individual difference. Similarly, we don't want to create a category in the DSM that pathologizes any sexual behavior that is outside the average, because obviously that leads to a lot of problems and a lot of serious issues in terms of human rights and ethics and so forth. So I will meet you on the next slide.